With the return of classroom participation, I will start each month's parent education session with quick tips for co-opers. It is my hope to include tips that will prove beneficial to our work both in the classroom as co-opers and to our work at home as parents. And now on to the co-oping minute. Need an idea when you are setting up lasting, engaging, story-based play for the children? Co-opers, you can think back to the book your teacher taught during story. In this example, the Tracks class is reading an adventure novel called Our Friend Hedgehog by Lauren Castillo. In one part, an important notebook got stuck in Beaver's Dam as the characters traveled down the river. Enter the down the river story idea for play. This idea was shaped by an adult. The adult said, "Hurry, get your raft, we're headed down the river to Beaver's Dam. I bet you'll be thirsty on our journey because it's bound to last a while. Get drinks too." You can see the children pulled over cushions, refreshments, and other bits to create their raft. Over time, more and more children joined, and the raft got larger and larger. You can see they also created Beaver's Dam with the bottle babies piled up and a whole collection of hidden notebooks or stuck notebooks up there on the tree stump. Parents, you can use this tip at home too. Use a favorite bedtime book as the catalyst for a play invitation. Co-opers, take note of this basket. Right now, this basket holds extra helpful supplies. If clean hand drying towels run out, check this basket for an extra stash. There's also cleaning supplies and rags in here. It's located on the cubby hook shelf, right by the first sink that you see right as you're entering the play yard. Note that this basket is only temporary. Eventually, these same supplies will be moved to a medicine cabinet in nearly the same location. The cabinet will be hung above the cubby shelf. And now for September's parent education session, the power of words. Words matter, and they're one of our mightiest tools in our parenting toolbox. Our words hold more power than we may realize. Language permeates nearly every interaction between parents and children, and it shapes how children think about themselves, how they act, and how they learn. Children pick up on subtle messages in what we say and do not say to them. Tonight, you will learn about how to hone your own language skills. If we use language precisely and honestly, we can expect our children to learn to do the same. Our teachers used the 1, 2, 3 framework to break to-do items and procedures, especially transition procedures, into manageable tasks. This is comforting for children. So, in keeping with that spirit, I mapped out tonight's agenda in a 1, 2, 3 framework. Tonight we will learn about the cooperative school's must-have language tools. Then we will learn about reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting language, or the 3 R's. Finally, in the Tips for Home section, you will learn favorite cooperative school language. The cues I will share will definitely be something you will want to put in your pocket for use at home, at school if you co-op, and around the town for playdates and other gatherings. Let's dive right in. What follows are the cooperative school's tried and true must-have language tools. Aspects of these tools overlap and many times are most effective when layered together. You can think of these language tools as the how our teachers talk, and how we as parents can learn to talk. Section 2 of tonight's agenda, the 3 R's, is the what specific language we can use. As you listen to and think about the language tools while I share, I invite you to not only think about your preschool-age child, but also to envision that preschool-age child as your one-day teenager. Everything I share is about building a strong foundation now while our children are young. We can put tools into action right now to pay it forward for our one-day teenage children. Language tool number 1. Make it a habit to describe what is happening. Narration is making observations and describing them out loud. When you see it, say it. There are many reasons to use narration. Simple narration can be used to address unwanted behaviors, to diffuse conflicts, to teach emotional literacy, to smooth transitions, and to encourage desirable behaviors by highlighting what's going well. That's a lot. So what does narration sound like in all of these situations? Some examples. When you want to address unwanted behavior, you can say something like, "You are kicking your feet." Saying, "You are both trying to climb up onto the same swing," is one start to diffuse conflict. Teaching emotional literacy, an example might be, "You are disappointed with this snack." To smooth a transition, you might say something like, "It is time to brush your teeth." And an example of highlighting what is going well would be, "You put on your shoes so expertly." In a recent Leaves class week in review, Leslie wrote an in-depth explanation of narration. It is certainly worth a read, as are all the week in reviews written by both teachers. A reminder that your own class week in review is required reading, but we have access to all the week in reviews. I think one benefit of being a member of the school is that you can read and learn from all 3 class week in reviews. That's a lot of opportunity for new learning. Going along with narration, I want to briefly reshare a tip and resource that I introduced last school year. This emotion wheel is one way you can work to expand your child's emotional vocabulary. For kids to best recognize feelings in themselves and others, they need to first have the words for those feelings. Lots of children might say they feel good or bad and miss other emotions in between. It is easier to talk children through situations when they themselves have a rich emotional vocabulary. This is helped with labels for many emotions: angry, sad, frustrated, lonely, confident. At school, our teachers work to expand and connect these labels. Using a resource like this emotion wheel or a set of emotions cards proves really helpful. We, especially as adults helping children learn about emotions, must work to avoid working from an overly narrow list of emotions like angry, sad, happy. There is so much more subtlety to it in reality. Emotional vocabulary is also about body, heart, and mind, or the whole person, the whole body. Asking questions like, "What is your body feeling right now?" or "now," or "back then," can be helpful. We can use narration to help children tune into their emotions and to tune into our emotions as their parent and caregiver. I could say something like, "Your eyebrows are clenched right now. It looks like you are frustrated. What is your body feeling right now?" as one way to narrate feelings and draw awareness to how a body is feeling. When you narrate, it's best to be clear, simple, and direct, which is our second go-to tool. Narration is not a flood of words. In fact, the less words you use, the better. Because in general, the less we talk, the more children listen. Build with the blocks. Keep the sand low. Before jumping, check for a clear landing. Those are all examples of using as few words as possible. And say what you mean. In non-negotiable situations, speak directly. Don't ask. For example, when walking through a parking lot, you actually mean, "Hold my hand." You don't mean, "Can you hold my hand?" Because an answer of no does not work in this particular situation. Of course, in other situations, asking questions to gain consent is exactly what you mean. For instance, "Can I give you a hug?" A child can say no to that question and definitely should say no if the child doesn't feel comfortable receiving a hug at that moment. Sometimes adults use the word we when really they mean you. In this example, when a child is running, sometimes adults say, "We need to walk." While the phrase "we" may seem like a softer way to deliver a message, it is less direct and can be confusing. In my running example, the adult wasn't running, and therefore "we" doesn't fit. Instead, you need to walk. Be clear and direct. And finally, describe the child's actions rather than the child. This is an attitude that expresses respect for children even though their actions may disappoint us. In stressing the deed, not the doer, the focus of the praise or the compliment, the criticism or disapproval is on the action, not on the character or the personality of the doer. When you name the deed, you preserve the doer. Your message becomes, "I like you. I just don't like this behavior." One way I may say something in that kind of situation is, "You are interrupting Javier. Javier will listen when it is your turn to tell the weather story." When narrating in a clear, simple, and direct way, remember to use a neutral, respectful tone. Our third go-to tool is all about tone and body language. A calm, neutral tone helps everyone maintain balance. But, of course, it is often hard for us if we are feeling frazzled or stressed. When we can use a neutral, respectful, judgment-free tone, we not only foster a positive environment and convey trust, but we also keep our own emotions in check. Taking a deep breath or practicing silence allows us to intentionally use a calm tone of voice and maintains the dignity of the children. Remember your nonverbal communication too. Our body language matters and definitely conveys a message. Another reminder is that children of all ages deserve the respect of a normal voice tone instead of talking down to them, like using baby talk. Narration is one way to make children become aware of each other. Our fourth go-to tool is making other people real. We want our children to know that other people are on the planet. Through narration, we can help foster awareness of the existence of other people and their names and their faces, their signals, their rights, and their wants, all by bringing these things to children's attention. So how can you do this? To start, you can name names. This is Quinn. Turn to her and say, "Quinn, I want to read the book when you're finished." You can establish face-to-face contact. And I don't mean eye contact. We don't need to make children look into each other's eyes, but we do need to have children read someone's face. I might say, "See, Jabari has tears on his face. Does he seem okay or hurt?" You can help children to be fluent in body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice, like especially their own tone of voice, but also others' tones as well. Saying things like, "Your crossed arms and stomping feet are telling me you are angry and that it's time to leave." Or, "I notice Bethel has a frown and a worried forehead. Let's ask her why she is upset." Or sometimes I might need to say, "I am using my firm voice. I need to keep you safe in this moment." To point out the rights of other people, I could say something like, "Lucia worked hard to build that tower. You must ask her if you can knock it down." And to point out the wants of other people, I could say things like, "You and Perul both want to hold the bunny," or "People in this waiting room don't feel well and would like us to read quietly or to wait quietly." When children have social emotional awareness, they start to learn that their choices affect the people around them. A quick nod back to the emotion wheel to say that as children expand their emotional vocabulary, they gain empathy. They see that they are no longer the center of the universe, the beginning and the end. Instead, they live in a community of people who are beautiful and varied, and each one of us is wonderfully flawed and gloriously prepared for great things. Introduce the wheel to your child and ask questions like, what could an angry face or voice or body language be telling you? What could a happy face, voice, or body language actually be telling you? And so on. Our fifth go-to tool is to map pathways to success. One way you can map successful pathways using language is to offer a limited choice. Another is to give a deferred choice, or thirdly, to declare a no choice. Choices set boundaries. They mark out what is possible. The sky is not the limit in the case of choices. At the same time, choices give children some control and encourage responsibility. You can use a limited choice when you want to cue a desired outcome or behavior. For example, are you going to sit in this chair or that chair? The hidden cue there is either way, the child is going to sit down in a chair. No matter which choice the child chooses, it leads to the outcome needed in the moment. Yet, it gives the child a manageable amount of agency. The key here is to stick to the choices offered. A third choice does not work. Some more examples. Which will you put on first, your shoes or your jacket? The hidden cue is, either way you are getting dressed to go outside. Will you pass the truck to your sister in 5 or 10? Either way, you are taking turns with the truck. It's almost bedtime. Will you put on your pajamas in 3 or 5? A deferred choice is another way of limiting choice, yet mapping a pathway to success. For instance, you might say, you must wear a hat for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you can take it off if you choose. Another example is, after you eat your dinner, you can choose either yogurt or berries for dessert. When circumstances require, usually things like safety, weather, or a particular venue, like a museum or a doctor's waiting room, calling your instruction a no choice puts it into a recognizable category. For instance, you might say, this is a no choice. You must hold my hand in the parking lot. Or, this is a no choice. You must wear your raincoat when it rains this hard. Our final go-to tool is to stand your ground. Standing your ground is an essential tool you will need to build a strong house, as Leslie calls it. And building a strong house now, when our children are young, is essential. Again, think about your now 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-old as a one-day teenager. What messages about language do we want to establish now? Standing your ground means when you use language to set limits, you have to stick to those limits. For sure, standing your ground will create a teachable moment, and crying likely will happen as a result. And that's okay. Acknowledge your child's hurt, go back to the initial instruction, and remind your child that tomorrow is another day, or even the afternoon is another time. You might say something like, when you don't get dressed, you will miss the party. And then if the dressing doesn't happen, you actually miss the party. Or another example, when you throw around hurtful words at the park, we will have to leave. So if your child says hurtful words, then leave. Parents, our words shouldn't be used as threats. In these instances, children learn something about the value of words. They also learn that their adults can be trusted to say what they truly mean. Stop means stop, not kind of stop. No means no. We're leaving means we're leaving. Now let's learn about reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting language. The 3 R's help us think about what we will say as we narrate, make other people real, and map pathways to success. Reinforcing language is a proactive strategy. That is, you use reinforcing language to front load for success. When play is running smoothly, notice it and talk about it. If a transition went well, see it and say it. When children are flexible, if change needs to happen, narrate the positives. This is reinforcing language at its best. Reinforcing language reinforces desired behaviors. Children build on their strengths, not their weaknesses. So it's vital for parents to see and name what children are doing well, and reinforcing language allows us to do that. Reinforcing language highlights children's skills, positive efforts and attitudes, and quality work so that they know what to stand on as they reach for the next higher rung in their learning and development. When you see something working well, say it. Here are some keys to make your reinforcing language even more effective. Name concrete and specific behaviors. Rather than saying a global "good job" or "nice work," tell children what they specifically did well so they know what to keep doing and what to build upon. Find positives to reinforce in all children. Every child has strengths. Over time, every child should feel that we see and appreciate their positive actions and attitudes. And in the case of siblings, cousins, playdates, and other times when children are gathered together, avoid holding one child up as an example for others. The child held up may feel triumphant, but the others are likely to feel devalued or criticized. And sometimes even the child held up may be embarrassed to be in the spotlight. Take a look at these examples to see how the keys to reinforcing language can be put into action. I like how "you are cleaning up" should be replaced with something more specific, like "you put the shells in the basket so quickly and so gently." The vague statement "great drawing" can be replaced with something like "you thought carefully about which shapes to make and which colors to use." A better way to say something like "good job sharing" would be "you remembered to give the shovel to Harry when you were finished." And "let's see who can put on their socks and shoes the fastest" should be said something more like "put on your socks and shoes. We will go outside when you are all dressed." The second R is reminding language. When you need it, ask for it. This means when you need a certain behavior, ask for it to happen. Just as we all need reminders to stay organized in our everyday lives, children need reminders to keep their play, work, and behavior on track. By using reminding language before a transition, before a challenging task, or right when children start to make a mistake, adults help them stay on task, to stay organized, responsible, and to be safe. Also keep in mind that reminding language, is most effective when both the child and adult feel calm. That's why it's so important to give reminders early, before a child's behavior has gone on long enough for frustration to build. Here are some keys to make your reminding language even more effective. First, prompt children to remember for themselves what they should be doing. This shows faith in their competence and builds their autonomy. When prompting, remember to use brief statements and not questions. Long strings of words are less effective. Next, use neutral tone and body language. Giving a reminder as a matter-of-fact piece of guidance shows respect for children. It also helps them focus on what they need to do rather than what we think of them. And finally, watch for follow-through, and then acknowledge it. After giving a reminder, take a moment to see if the child acts. If we don't do this, children may learn that we don't mean what we say. Let's take a look at how to turn cues into more effective reminding language. Instead of saying, "We are pushing and shoving, we can do better," try being more specific. "You are pushing. Find your own space to stand in." Or even use the child's name. "Sarah, you are pushing. Find your own space to stand in." Remember, the use of the pronoun we implies that you are also included in the behavior. And in this situation, in many situations, the adult is not pushing and shoving. We does not apply to this situation. Here's a second example. You're going to hurt someone when you carry sticks like that. Do you remember yesterday when you got poked with a stick? It really hurt and you cried. That's too wordy. The child is lost after the first sentence and isn't really learning from your language. Try something more succinct. You are close to other children. Keep your stick low. It tells the child what's happening and what they need to do to change their behavior. The third R is redirecting language. Redirecting language is clear, non-negotiable instructions. Let's learn more about when to use redirecting language. When children are doing something harmful to themselves or others, are too far into a mistake to correct themselves, or are too emotional to think reasonably about what they're supposed to be doing, adults need to redirect them with clear words. Skillfully used, redirecting language lets adults provide wise external control to keep children safe and productive when their self-control is failing them. As with reminding language, it's important to be brief and to use a neutral tone and neutral body language when giving a redirection. Here are some other essentials to keep in mind. Be direct and specific. When children are far enough into a mistake to need a redirection, they need to hear exactly what you want them to do differently. Say what to do instead of what not to do. Naming the desired behavior is clear and respectful of children. And follow up with action if necessary. Watch to see if the child follows your redirection. If not, give a clearer redirection. Redirect with different language cues, perhaps even fewer words. Here are some examples of how redirecting cues can be reworded to be more effective. Instead of saying, "Stop running," try the cue, "Walk like a clock." This is a cue that our teachers at school use often. A quick bit of background if you've never heard it, in case it doesn't really make sense at the moment. A clock sounds even and steady. Tick, tock, walk like a clock. And that phrase, the teachers don't always use the tick-tock part, but the walking like a clock implies the steady rhythm of a beat of a clock ticking. And of course, it's not a super fast ticking, so that's where the walking comes in. Instead of saying, "Would you come sit by me?" just say, "Sit here." Instead of saying, "We don't use mean words," say something like, "You're throwing that word around like it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something." And instead of, "How many times do I have to say no talking?" simply say, "It's time to listen." You're sending sound out into the world. With redirecting language, it's important to pause here to mention all stop behaviors. So sometimes behaviors need to stop before we use redirecting language or any kind of language. The first step would be stopping the behavior. So what is an all stop behavior? All stop behaviors include endangering self, others, or materials through actions or through words. This includes things like running away, hiding, hitting, throwing, or hurting other people's bodies or feelings. The actions may be unintentional, but without an all stop, we cannot begin to resolve the conflict and arrive at the teachable moment. So first comes the all stop of the behavior, and then second comes the language. And a bonus type of language, envisioning language. When adults make statements and ask questions that help children create positive mental images of themselves, the adults help everyone see themselves achieving and behaving in ways that connect to and go beyond what they already know and can do. Helping children form and own a vision of themselves achieving success is important for both parents and teachers. Language is a key tool for doing this. For example, you could say something like, mathematical thinkers are always looking for ways to solve problems with fewer steps. You figured out how many without even counting. You looked with your eyes. You are such a mathematician. Statements like these help all children see themselves and those around them as capable of success and high achievement. I'd like to share an example through photos of how our teaching staff layers language tools and the 3 R's expertly to guide children. This is Alana, our talented guest teacher, and the tracks class. All throughout this exchange, which I had the pleasure of watching, Alana used a neutral, respectful tone, was clear, simple, and direct, mapped pathways to success, made other people real, and stood her ground as she described what was happening and what needed to happen to keep everyone safe. To set the scene quickly, there are 4 players in this jumping game, 3 who are standing on the top level of the storm house, and 1 climbing up to join. You'll notice an additional child underneath the storm house. It's important to know that this child is involved in a completely different play story and isn't even aware the jumping play is happening. Here, Alana is using language to front load for success. She is talking through the jumping game before it even started. She used reminding language to set the stage for 1 person at a time jumping, the pattern of turn taking, and the safety check of making sure there's a clear landing before jumping. And they're off. The play begins. Alana continues to talk, this time using reinforcing language. She sees the play running smoothly and narrates that for the children. The play continues as planned. The children are taking turns. They are going 1 at a time. They are checking for a clear landing. Again, Alana is using the reminding language just to let the children know they're doing the things that they need to be doing to make this play enjoyable for all. As I mentioned earlier, there was a track who was playing on the bottom level of the storm house. Again, he was playing something completely different than the jumping play and wasn't even really aware that the jumping was happening. When he came out all of a sudden to the lower level, he happened to walk right through the jumping play, which of course isn't safe. So Alana called an all stop. Jumpers stop jumping. She had to stop the behavior before she could use language cues to redirect what was happening. So she said, jumpers stop jumping. Then she used redirecting language and even body language, you can see with her pointing hand, and said something like, use the side entrance to get in and out of the storm house. There's jumping happening here. You can tell her body language and tone remained calm while she offered clear, simple, and direct expectations to this child. She does not look frazzled, upset, angry. Here, Alana is following up with action. She watched to see if the child followed her initial redirection, and then she redirected again with a different cue, this time using fewer words. Come this way. Use this entrance while they jump." You can see she remained gentle and respectful of the child, remembering he is lost in his own play world at the moment. She never scolded or assumed he should know what to do in this particular situation. Instead, she gave a clear redirection and made sure it happened so everyone could play safely. This again is the Tracks class, and this is our teacher Ada leading the conversation. And this is a class meeting that happened the day after the jumping game, the jumping play that we just saw in the previous slide. So the next day, the jumping play continued to happen, and also similar play happened on the blue slides. Some children were playing rolling the bike tires down the blue slides to see how far they could go and to see who could go the furthest. In both instances, the jumping play and the bike tire rolling game, there were some people participating and some people not. So Ada's in this instance, she's using both reinforcing and reminding language in this class meeting to remind children that they need to be aware of others. So she's making other people real here. And she's telling the class that even if they're not playing jumping or if they're not playing rolling, they need to have some level of awareness of what's going on around them. So yes, the jumpers need to check for a clear landing, but other kids need to look before they walk through a pathway to make sure no one's jumping. Same thing with the slides. Yes, the children at the top of the slides need to check to make sure that there's no one at the bottom before they roll the tire down. But students who are traveling right underneath the slides need to make sure there's a clear pathway for them too. And in this photo, Ada taught the class some body language. So in this exact photo, Ada's teaching the I don't know body language, but the children also went over how they would say yes or no, just with body language and without words. So they can give a thumbs up signal to show that they heard something or that they're acknowledging something. That is a widely used cue at our school, is a thumbs up. And then they were talking also about shaking a head yes or no to indicate that a position. Common shared language of the cooperative school gets us on the same page and supports the children's development socially, emotionally, and cognitively. In our Tips for Home section, I'll share our school's most used language cues. You can use this same language at home, at the playground, during play dates, in the classroom if you co-op, and any other time you find yourself in the company of a child or children. There are a lot of language cues that our teachers use at school, but we do have this list called 10 cues to get us on the same page. And you can think of those as the basic 10 cues, the cues that get used over and over again. The slide has a screenshot of what the one-page handout of the 10 cues looks like. And this is housed on the member site. So if you ever want to print a copy to refer to at home, that is one spot where you can find this handout. So here are the basic 10 language cues: time and place, flexibility, egg, kindness, what's your plan, space invader, thumbs up, say it with I, 0 to 60, and stuck. I'll go through each one of these in a little more depth, but I also wanted to point out that be on the lookout for tape stickers to reinforce something that your child's class is working on at school. And a tape sticker is kind of exactly what it sounds like, a piece of tape on their shirt that would have a word like flexibility. Or a tape sticker might be a piece of masking tape with the phrase "say it with I" written on it. And that just shows that the child's class is working on that. But if your child's wearing one, your child did that day. So they did actually say something with I, or they did show flexibility. You can try this tape sticker technique at home too. When you need a behavior and you're asking for it and you're working on it, if you see it, you can, of course, say it with your narration, but then you can even reinforce the fact that you saw it by writing the word, like kindness, on a piece of masking tape and sticking it to your child's shirt. So the first cue of the basic 10 is time and place. This means there's a time and place for everything, but it may not be now and it may not be here. So you can use this cue when the action or reaction doesn't belong in the space or the time that you find yourself. For instance, loud voices in a doctor's waiting room. That wouldn't be the time or place for a loud voice. There is a time and place for running feet, but it's not everywhere. So in an example, if a child was running down the sidewalk and into the street without, stopping at the corner, you could say there is a time and place to run, and this is not it. It's important to note that the more you use this language, the less words you have to use, and eventually you can just say time and place. Flexibility. So you can use flexibility when a child or an adult changes their approach or needs, either upon request or independently. First, notice aloud when your child has been flexible. This could be when they tried something new or stopped what they were doing. And when you see flexibility in action and notice it, your child will come to know flexibility as something you appreciate. And as you keep this habit of noticing flexibility, then you can ask for flexibility when you need it. Again, the more that they hear this word, you can just use the simple cue, flexibility. The third cue, egg. Egg is used at our school to symbolize space. So you have an egg, I have an egg. Sometimes we have a shared egg, but we have to ask permission before we enter another person's space or their egg. At school, special items from home are in someone's egg. So that's part of their egg. Their stuffed lamb that they sleep with at night, that's part of their egg. Backpacks are part of someone's eggs. Teacher materials are part of the teacher's egg. They have a storage chest on the classroom floor, and that chest is in the teacher's eggs. Someone building with blocks, the block structure that person has created is part of their egg. Someone painting at the easel, their painting is in their egg. And it's really, really important that parents have eggs too. And they can say, that's in my egg, or you're in my egg right now. You need to ask before you come into my egg. Sometimes people need really big eggs, and the teachers point this out. If someone's feeling, especially a word teacher sometimes uses, prickly, they're just having one of those moments where they need some extra space, then the teachers will call out to others, today Amy needs a really big egg. And sometimes you don't need such a big egg. Next is kindness. So this cue is used when a child or an adult extends kindness or exhibits empathy toward others. And the kindness cue works best when adults in a child's life continuously remark upon acts of kindness when they observe it. Either when they observe their child doing it, or maybe when they observe just someone else. It could even be a stranger that you notice when you're walking through the neighborhood and you see someone bend down to pick up someone's hat that fell, their winter hat that fell down, and then that person is giving it, speeding up to give it back to the person who dropped it. and you say, that was a kindness. That person showed a kindness by returning the winter hat that fell. Otherwise, the other person would have lost it and not even realized. So when you keep drawing attention to kindness, then when kindness is needed, the child knows kindness is something that holds great value. They understand what it means, and they're more likely to give you that kindness. So when you need it, you can ask for it. The next cue is, what is your plan? And this is a question, the longer question here is, what is your plan for expression of your needs, your ideas, your anger, your energy, etc. So what is your plan for that thing that is happening or holding you up right now? This cue is especially helpful for children who are working through transitions. But basically what you're trying to do here is work out a plan with your child in advance, numbering the steps that will need to happen to complete something or solve a problem. You might write down a child's plan for something they struggle with, like getting ready to leave the house or taking turns with toys when their cousins come over. So what is your plan would be the cue, and in the beginning stages of using this cue, you actually have to write down that plan, post it on the wall, refer to it later. That plan becomes a guide and a comfort. And once your child's in the habit of doing this, once this is more familiar, you can use what is your plan in the moment. And those words, what is your plan, will make sense, and then cue up a system of problem solving which is guided by your child. This is a great cue, as all of these are, but think about this cue with a teenage child too. What is your plan? What is your plan for any of that? What is your plan for getting home safely in the car? What is your plan if you do not feel comfortable getting in the car with that person? Is your plan that you're calling me? What is your plan if you're in any situation where you feel some level of discomfort? How will you handle it? We can talk about it now so that when the moment arises, you're not caught off guard and you already have a plan. The next cue, Space Invader, is just a quick way to remind someone that they're approaching or they're getting too close to someone's egg. So it's a reminder to stay outside of the egg. And that egg could be about personal space in the moment, like you are too close, you're invading that person's space. You are invading Jessica's space right now. Or it could be about other things in that person's egg. Remember, a block tower is in someone's egg. A painting is in someone's egg. The pattern block robot that someone built at the table is in their egg. Their snack box is in their egg. So it could be a reminder about things too. The next cue, thumbs up, is a way to show you heard. And in this category, it's important to know, like nodding, yes, plus also like a verbal expression, I got it, also count. It doesn't have to be thumbs up, but it's just a reminder to us as parents that it's really important to close the loop when receiving an instruction, and so that some sort of confirmation back needs to happen, whether that's a thumbs up or a head nod or actual words. Acknowledging that they heard something is not always easy for young children, and so you have to model the confirmation, but the adult has to model that confirmation, and it shows that confirming that something's understood is an important part of an interaction or conversation. Also, keep in mind that thumbs up is a good thing to use if you have a child who's reluctant to greet a person they have just met. They could signal, hello, or just their involvement in the situation of meeting with a thumbs up as well. And then say it with I. That's a reminder that during conflict resolution or problem-solving situations, we want to ask for the I statement from each child. So the cue is say it with I. The child is not... instead of focusing on what someone else does, that's their go-to, right? He did this to me. She did that. They did this. Instead, it's more productive for each child to say, their own feelings. So they will describe how they are feeling with an I statement. I don't like when you come into my egg and knock down my block tower. And then we have 0 to 60, and this cue indicates an inappropriate emotional or physical reaction to a situation. It also comes with a hand gesture, which you can't see me right now, but basically if you start with your hands down low, kind of, by your stomach area, and you're saying you were at 0, you went from 0 to 60, and then you can raise your hands all the way above your head to show how you were all the way down here, and then your reaction got this big, this fast. You just went from here to here, and that you're drawing attention to that. And a lot of times this might also, it's not always, but it can be used with a cue escalation, like the situation was here and then it escalated all the way to here. And stuck is another cue to draw awareness of. So someone can be stuck, when they just won't get up. For instance, they are stuck. But stuck also refers to arguing or the back and forth, like yes, no, I want to play that, yes, no. A chant can be stuck, if someone's doing a sing-song chant and that is just really not the time or place for it, which oftentimes, as parents, that can be hard to hear over and over again. So a chant is a place where we could call out that you are stuck in that chant. Inflexibility in a moment is also stuck. Sometimes not putting your shoes on. We could call out you are stuck right now with that. So this is just where another way to think about it is forward progress is not happening when someone or some people are stuck. So the cue is you are stuck. How will you get unstuck? What will you do now? And you're drawing attention to the fact that the child is stuck, but of course the goal is to get unstuck. In the next 3 slides, I've collected some additional language gems that I had the privilege of hearing teachers say during my time as a co-opper. I'll briefly explain the intention of the language cue and provide an example of when you might use each one. Open your heart, extend kindness, and send out kindness and you will get kindness in return are very similar in their message and intent. Again, these go with the kindness cue that is part of our top 10 list. After you've done the work of noticing kindness in your child or other people, you will use words like open your heart or extend kindness or send out kindness in order to call for the kindness when you need it. For instance, open your heart and sit next to your sister at dinner tonight. For your playing against, this is when you use this in play when someone is literally playing against someone else. And most often this happens without their consent. So for instance, chasing. Sometimes the play story has led to chasing someone else and that person just is not even involved in the same line of story. When children play against, it almost immediately ends the fun and ends the long-lasting story-based play. I always look for against play and try to redirect it to have more togetherness to keep the story going. For instance, if there was chasing or if children deemed someone else a bad guy without their consent, it's better to have the children work for a collective goal. For instance, let's build a trap for Baba Yaga. And in the case of Baba Yaga, I'm using her as a story character that the class is familiar with from the book that their teacher has taught them. And there won't actually be a child playing Baba Yaga. Instead, the children will be working together to create this trap or to create a potion or to do whatever for the idea of Baba Yaga. Leslie does a really nice job of explaining some other implications for playing against in our September 2021 parent education recording. And at the end of this presentation, I'll share a little bit more about that. You're feeling prickly goes along with the egg cue from the basic 10 cues, and it just basically is also another way to point out how a child's feeling. If you remember from way back at the start of this parent education session, I talked about how it's helpful to give children the whole body experience of how they're feeling in their body. And while they're developing emotional literacy, they need our help with that. So you can call out your child when they're feeling prickly. You can call out yourself when you're feeling prickly. You can be prickly as a parent. I also, in my other lens that I work with children, I can be prickly as a teacher. And it's okay to call that out. When someone's feeling prickly, a lot of times they need a larger egg, more egg space. You're pushing the crying out with your voice. The intention here is, of course, crying is natural. Crying is honored. We don't stop crying or tell children they shouldn't cry. But this is about the kind of crying that's the really wailing kind. Crying doesn't have to sound that loud. So this is just to draw attention in the moment that the crying's happening, yes, and of course that is all fine and well, but it doesn't need to be pushed out with your voice. And pushing crying out with your voice when that happens is often a 0 to 60 moment. Like the pushing the crying out with your voice escalates the situation. Hold it in your heart can really be for two reasons, probably more, but the two that I'll highlight here is with disappointment. Sometimes when a child's really disappointed in something, they might need to hold it in their heart, like they didn't get the snack that they wanted when they open up their lunchbox, and they can hold that disappointment in their heart or those feelings there. But a more recent implication that we learned from Dr. Risi, who is a pediatric acupuncturist, among other things, all around expert. But when something is dear, some event or feeling, that has to be marked so that our child can call upon it later, that event of happiness. So we should hold that in our heart. We should pause in the moment to hold in our heart, for instance, just the perfect scene of leaves drifting off a tree, and how you're enjoying it as the parent, and your child has the biggest smile on their face as a leaf tumbles from the sky and lands on their head. And you, as the adult, can pause in the moment and say, let's hold this moment in our heart. And you can describe all the senses around it, what you're smelling, how you're feeling, and the emotions surrounding it. At school, the teachers do this a lot while reading stories, but also a recent example is when the class was telling the weather, and it was just the bluest of blue skies against these sharp, sharp green leaves, and that was a moment to hold in their heart. I bet they'll call that back up when it's the coldest of coldest winter days, maybe even a winter day with a freezing cold rain, and we can call back up how we felt on that blue sky day, knowing that kind of day will return again. So the next two language cues are similar in nature. You're playing with words, and that word means something, and you're throwing it around like it doesn't mean anything. Those are both really similar, and can be used interchangeably. but it's really to draw attention when someone is using language, name-calling language, or potty words, just things that wouldn't be what we hope for our child to say. It wouldn't be something we would hope for our own selves, for adults to say. And you're calling attention that they're just, a lot of times children are playing around with words. They're playing with a word to see how it feels to say it. They're trying to see if it's a power word. Saying something like, "You're not invited to my birthday party," it feels like a place of power for a child. Similarly, "You're not my friend," or "You won't be my friend. I won't be your friend, I'm sorry, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, or if you don't sit next to me." So those are all playing around with words. They really are. It really means a lot of those cues or the things children say in those situations come from a place of hurt. The child is either hurt or scared of the unknown or worried that someone really won't be their friend anymore. And they're just playing around with something that feels powerful. So we can call out this idea that they're playing with words, but they're playing with words that actually really do mean something. And you can't just toss words like that around. This is tickling you is a great one to use when a child just kind of has the giggles about something or is just, the idea here is like you feel tickled by this and that we need that to stop. It's a lot of times for like an inappropriate moment, like this is tickling you and this is not the time or place. You're holding on with all 10 of your fingers is a great one to use when two people, well, you could use it with two people, you're both holding on with all 10 of your fingers, or even just one child, but is holding on to something or they're grabbing and pulling from each other. And it's to draw attention that they're both holding on so tightly and that no one can have it at the moment when there's this grabbing back and forth. Or a pattern of turn taking is never going to happen if one child's just holding on to the material with all 10 of their fingers. Drawing attention again to whole body, that your fingers are gripped around this, and that everyone's going to open up their hands. And then we will start the pattern of turn taking. I shared a little bit on a co-oping newsletter that we say turn taking at our school instead of sharing. Sharing implies permanence. If you think about you've ever shared a drink of water with someone, I share my glass of water all the time. Somehow there's never any water left when it's my turn to have some of that water. Or if you share a sandwich with someone, when they take their bites, those bites never reappear. So sharing is forever. When turn taking, that language sets up the expectation that my turn isn't finished forever. It's my turn now, it's the next person's turn, and then there's time and space for me to have another turn. And it'll go back and forth in that pattern. How long do you need it? 5 or 10 is a cue children can use when they'd like a turn with something. They also want to sit on the tractor. They can ask the child who's sitting on the tractor, how long do you need the tractor? 5 or 10? The person on the tractor can decide. You could also say 2 or 3. I know Teresa uses different numbers with the seeds class. 5 or 10 is definitely used in the tracks class, but those numbers are kind of arbitrary, except for they're just setting this idea up that you won't stay on the tractor forever. You will get up, and then someone else will have a turn, and then you can have a turn too again. And I think it's important to note that we don't attach like 5 or 10 minutes because there's no timer. There's no actual timer being set. Likewise, we don't say 5 or 10 seconds. It's just kind of 5 or 10 marking time. And you're starting a sentence with but. I actually heard Leslie say this to my child for the first time. The first time I heard it, she was saying it to my child. Leslie was giving a direction, something like walk into the classroom. And then he replied, but, I think he was probably going to explain what he was doing. And it was the first time I really heard this idea of when you say back to the child, you're starting a sentence with but, that when we do say but as a reply, that it's like not acknowledging the initial thought of the speaker. Is this a big problem or a little problem? Again, helps shape a child's perception, or reshape, I should say, a child's perception of something. A lot of problems are little problems, meaning they can be solved and it's not the end of everything because it's happening. Calling attention to something as a little problem helps children manage it differently. You need to own the decision. I'm just again, like thinking of helping children develop this idea that there's natural consequences to many of our actions. A quick one for owning a decision would be if a child steps into the creek and gets all wet with their clothes, they have to own that decision. Thinking especially if you've already front-loaded your child by reminding them that you weren't expecting to stop at the creek today and you don't have a change of clothes, so that they will be in the wet clothes until they get all the way home. If it actually happens, you can say you need to own that decision. Similarly, you need to sit with that disappointment. So, and disappointment can be replaced with sadness or another emotion, but sitting with disappointment, sometimes we are disappointed at things and we just need to sit with that. Similarly, well, not similarly, I would say oppositely, as I was sharing another way that you can hold something in your heart to call up positive emotions. Sometimes children also need to just sit with a disappointment, which is something that's a little bit more uncomfortable. And then this next one where it says blank looks different than that. One way you can think about how that works is standing up looks different than that. Or sitting in your chair looks different than that. So you're saying, you could use that when someone isn't standing up after you've asked them to. Or walking on the sidewalk looks different than that. And we have your signaling, which children could signal many different things, but in this example I'm using right now is you're signaling you're finished with your food when you play with it. So when you play with your food, you're signaling you're finished and that we should clear your dinner plate. You can imagine other scenarios where you could use that. And finally, try yes is just something so simple. If a child is not agreeable to something, you can just use your words to say, try a yes here. Try yes. If you're interested in hearing even more language cues, the recording of the September 2021 Parent Education Session explains many of the cues shared here, as well as others. You can find the recording on the school's YouTube channel. Skip ahead 38 minutes and 26 seconds into the presentation for the section on language cues.